I worked for Weight Watchers lecturing. I then went to work in the police as an administrator, so general office work. I supervised the staff there, the civilian staff. I then sidestepped into crime scene investigation, which I think at that time, that was my, I'd found then my niche, I'd found a good fit. But by then I was in my 30s. I then left the police, having gone through the ranks of crime scene investigation and managed crime scenes and managed staff. And I became self-employed as a subject matter expert in crime scene investigation. And I now work across the world, training crime scene investigators, Ministry of Interior, military personnel. Okay, at the time, the police were downsizing, and this crime scene investigation job was on the same grade. And like a lot of organisations, they will always advertise internally first. So sometimes, you know, if you're looking to get into an organisation and you want a particular job, if a vacancy comes up in that organisation, my advice to you would be apply for the vacancy, get your foot in the door, get your face known, do a bit of networking. And then if a vacancy comes up of the type that you're actually after, you are in a strong position to apply, because these organisations advertise internally first. In order to get into the police now as a crime scene investigator, for anybody that wanted to, firstly, you don't go straight in as a crime scene investigator. You go in as what they call a volume crime scene investigator now in most police forces across the country. So a crime scene investigator would deal with all kinds of crime. A volume crime scene investigator would deal with exactly what it says on the tin, volume crime. And volume crime is classed as burglary dwelling, theft from motor vehicle, maybe burglary from a shop premises, that kind of thing. So you kind of have to cut your teeth on the volume crime. And then if your face fits and a crime scene investigation post comes up, you can then be promoted into that rank, and they will send you then for further training. I basically do training of staff. I do mentoring. So one of my proudest moments, if you like, was mentoring in the Amazon jungle. So a little place called Iquitos, which you can't get into by road. You can only get in by boat or by plane. And when you're actually landing in there, you're landing in the Amazon jungle, you look out of the window of the plane and it just looks like you're going to land in a sea of broccoli. It's the most amazing place. And the South American people I absolutely adore. They're such humble people. And so that particular program lasted probably 3 to 4 years. And so I'd gone out there and I'd trained police officers who knew nothing about crime scene investigation to become crime scene investigators. We then picked the best of the bunch. And in order to leave them with resilience when the project had finished, we then trained them to be trainers. I finally reached a level in my career where I do feel I'm making a change. There can be cultural difficulties. I think you have to appreciate firstly that when you go into somebody else's culture, you have to perhaps adapt is the best way. So for example, in Bahrain, when I went out there, I was teaching all men. And you can imagine in the Saudi background, women were treated very, very differently out there. And to stand in front of people, and the crime scene investigators are all men. And so to stand in front of a group of men and earn their respect, that can be very challenging. We had Saudi men and they're all high-ranking officers, that's the other thing, come over to the UK. And again, one of the things that we naturally do pre-COVID, we would shake hands. And being a woman, there would be men who wouldn't touch a woman. So upon meeting them, I very quickly, I think I did it instinctively, I don't know what it was, did this, sort of cross to my chest, and they would do the same. And then I would have men who were, it sounds crazy, but it's a cultural thing. The men who were virgins wouldn't even look me in the eye, and I was trying to teach them. And so when I would be talking to them, because a lot of it is practical work, so we would set up a crime scene, we would have dummies, playing dead people and so on, and blood distribution. And I would get the group together. And one guy in particular, when I went to speak, would walk away. Now, how do you teach somebody who every time you speak walks away? So again, it's knowing how to handle it. And I very quickly realized that they are very rank orientated. So I literally got the guy who was of the highest rank, and every time the guy walked away, told him to tell him to come back. And on about day 4, I was sat down on the grass making notes, and this guy came and sat next to me and asked me questions, where it's taken him 4 days to appreciate that I know what I'm talking about, and if he doesn't engage with me, he's not going to learn anything. So the cultural differences can be quite difficult. What I would say is it's a great job. The issue can often be that people watch there's a lot of crime scene investigation on the TV, and it's very glamorous. It's not a glamorous job. It's probably one of the least glamorous jobs. When you're out in the middle of the night, in the teams of rain, your hair's plastered to your head and you're freezing cold, or alternately you're roasting hot and you're working long hours. It's not a glamorous job. It's a vocation. That's the thing. Now, personally, I don't think that you know whether or not you're cut out for it until you're doing it. And that's the reality. And some people will be like me, and they will just think, I love this. I'm a square peg in a square hole. I'm a round peg in a round hole. Other people will say, this is not for me. And I met people like that along the way. When I did my training, there was a girl who, it was not for her. She loved forensics, but she very quickly realized she was more of a laboratory type mindset. She preferred to work on her own. She could focus on a piece of evidence. She could dissect the piece of evidence, but she couldn't deal with people. So she left and went to work into the lab. So that's the first thing. Don't be fooled into thinking it's like the television. It is not like the television. It is not glamorous. You do not wear high heels and all. It's just not like that, And now, currently, if you want to be in crime scene investigation, the police forces want you to have a degree. So if you're lucky enough to realise that that's what you want before you sign up for university or college, then sign up for some kind of forensic degree. Once you've got that forensic degree, you can then apply to police forces to go on attachment. And the more hours that you get in that you're actually not being paid for, again, it's about thousands of people apply for these jobs. There are not thousands of jobs. So you need to be ahead of the game. And as much as you can put yourself ahead of the game, the more beneficial it will be. I guess if you can get yourself to an interview, it should then be a level playing field. That forensic degree, it opens other doors. It doesn't just open the doors of crime scene investigation, it does open the doors to work in the lab or to work in one of the other departments. Whether it might be that you decide to be a fingerprint officer. It might be that you decide to work in the DNA department. It might be, it might be that you've got a degree in photography and you go and work in forensic photography. Some of the police forces now have their own drones. I mean, if you've got these kind of qualifications, so it's not limited to just forensics, and it's not limited to just the crime scene investigation department. I worked with, I dealt with a lot of murders. I dealt with a lot of serious and major crime in my career. As part of the job, you attend the post-mortem. What it does is it makes you view death differently. Now, consequently, I'm the youngest of 7. I watched, I didn't watch them die, but I lost both my parents died when I was young. I lost 2 sisters and a brother. I failed to grieve. I consequently had, I call it a breakdown. I was off work sick for 16 weeks. It come out of nowhere. It hit me from nowhere. And I went for counselling, and the counsellor actually said to me, "You have failed to disassociate yourself from work and home life." And I hadn't viewed my siblings as siblings that I'd lost, that I needed to grieve over. I'd viewed them as another dead body, and I'd gone in and I'd looked, my brother in particular has had a post-mortem, and I looked to see that they'd put him back together correctly. My brother-in-law asked me, my sister's makeup wasn't right. The family viewed me differently, and I was the one that dealt with death. So can you fix her makeup? And so I did. But some 18 months later, that literally bit me hard, and I went down like a lead balloon. Now, what I will say, because there's always a positive to everything, what that subsequently did for me, when I then became a crime scene manager or a supervisor, and I was then managing crime scene investigators, I was very conscious of how they treated their home life and their job. And I think it made me a better manager. I then went on to, I applied to be trained in trauma risk identification so that I could identify very early on in any of my staff if I thought that they had early signs of trauma. Now, as it happens, when I got to the College of Policing, one of my colleagues at the College of Policing, we were teaching together, we were actually teaching about staff welfare. And he started telling a story of something that he dealt with, and I identified early signs of trauma in him. And he subsequently went for counselling over it. And he thanked me in the end, and he said nobody had ever pointed it out to him before, that it was a job that he'd carried with him. I'm more than happy personally to help anybody out with an application. You can find me on LinkedIn. If I can help, I will help. If I'm out of the country and I'm not available to help, I'll almost certainly point you in the direction of somebody that can.